My name is Mason Ketcham. And today I get the privilege of introducing today's speaker. Dr. Sharon Ketcham earned her PhD in Theology and Education from Boston College and has served on the faculty for 20 years. She is currently the first dean of the School of Ministry, Theology, and Biblical Studies. Dr. Ketcham cares about rising generations. That would be us. You can see this in her 2018 book, Reciprocal Church, her leadership of Faith, Learning, and Living campus initiative, and today, by trying out a collaborative sermon with 5 students. Many of you get to call her Dr. Ketcham, but my sister and I get to call her Mom. Please welcome Dr. Sharon Ketcham.
I hope each of you have a moment to be honored in that way. I am the youngest of 3, and maybe in your family you had the responsibility of some chore in your house. For me, it was setting the table. It was a good job, though, because my brother, he had to take out the trash. Nasty job. We don't want to do that, right? My sister, she had to wash the dishes. So I became very good at setting the table because I wanted to keep that job. That's my job today. My job is only to set the table. You see, this summer I was listening to a sermon at my church. Pastor Aaron Gaudreau, right over there, and his family, shout out, who inspired me to by mentioning Psalm 18. And the way that he spoke about it, I flipped there and I started reading. Maybe I stopped listening for just a minute, but only a minute, Aaron, only a minute. Because the images in that psalm just captivated me. And I thought, what if our students stood up and used their artistic expressions to show that? So that's what we're doing today. My job is only to set the table. I'm going to give you some background on Psalm 18 before we read it. First of all, it's super long, 50 verses. If I read it straight through, it would take us 7 minutes, and we don't have enough time. So we're only going to go through 19 of those verses. The third longest psalm in the Bible. Psalms are categorized in different ways. This is a royal psalm. Royal psalm pays attention to themes about kings. The earthly king, that's what this one's going to be about. A testimony of an earthly Greek king telling how God has delivered him. And it's a testimony about the almighty king, the God, the creator of heaven and earth, the God who reigns. It's a royal psalm. 3 things that I'd like you to pay attention to as you hear this. First of all, you're going to hear from the psalmist that he's in distress. Let's talk about distress for a minute. See my image up there? 2 lines with a little dot, right? Little degree here going on. Look at the dot for a minute. A couple of weeks ago, I was in California. I was at a conference. I'd been going pretty hard for a couple of days, kind of trapped with the little beverages of water and coffee, and I really just needed like a fun drink. Anyone ever need a fun drink, a little pick-me-up in the day? You know what I mean? So I'm going, I could get some kind of fun latte, a little ice, something. If I need to, maybe it'd be a Diet Coke, and all I could find was a Diet Pepsi. I know. Feel it with me. Distress. Okay, wait, it's actually not distress. It's actually disappointment or frustration. You know, we can sometimes think we feel distress when maybe we need a change of perspective. Standing in line too long at the bistro feels like distress, change of perspective. Walking in the rain might feel like distress, but probably change of perspective. I want to talk about distress. 3 degrees of distress. Number 1, root word, stress. Overwhelmed. Are you like me and you had a super busy weekend and your Monday is kind of hitting you hard? Overwhelmed with the stress of all that there is to do. Or maybe underwhelmed. Longing for connection, longing for relationship. Stress, dare I say it, my dear seniors? How's it feeling? Looking at the future, stress. So we can go 1 degree with that. The next level will be suffering. Mental health challenges, financial challenges, sickness in a family, burden, needs that weigh you, right? And you try to put on that mask and walk through the day. But distress is the feeling of suffering. One more. Dire circumstances. On the brink. Have you felt it? Have you seen someone feel it? On the brink of life and death. My kids were super little. I got way sick, was in the hospital for 3 weeks fighting for my life. After multiple blood transfusions, massive life-saving surgery, on the brink. That was distress. Have you felt it? Stress, suffering, on the brink. All are distress, felt to various degrees. Today, we're going to meet a psalmist. He's on the brink. Second, you're going to hear a bunch of visions. They're actually super crazy. You're going to see these violent images of God's power impacting creation. You're going to see God described through human attributes, God going to dramatic lengths, literally described as crawling out of the temple to come to the rescue, to deliver. You see, these violent descriptions are trying to call us to God's power. And it's not any kind of power. It's not like the fee-fi-fo-fum, I'm the giant, I rule the earth power. It's the power that says, I reign. These are my people. This is my space. Where there's evil, where there's sin, where there's suffering, I come to scatter your enemies, and I come to deliver. So you're going to hear from your classmates. You're going to hear from Jenna Jung a description of God as deliverer. The deliverer is the one that the king owes his life to. You're going to hear from Ainsley Milevsky a poem of God as refuge, God who provides shelter in danger. You're going to hear from Miley Paris 3 exquisite pieces of art where she's going to describe God as foundation. And you're going to hear from Johnny Paul Fana and from Easton Dundor an originally written song, all this morning, and all inspired by Psalm 18. You've got distress, we've got some crazy images, and we've got some memory. As you listen to this psalm, you're going to notice that the descriptions of distress lead to a moment of trust, declaring trust for God, and eliciting a type of hope. And it's kind of crazy because if you're like me and you have felt distress, you feel distress because you actually feel God's absence. You feel that God should be showing up in this moment and God should be changing your circumstances because it's not how the world should be. It shouldn't be so broken and suffering. There shouldn't be such a weight. So you feel God's absence. But the reason that the psalmist can trust, it's not because of the momentary circumstances. It's because of his memory. His memory of being part of a larger story of God's deliverance. So you feel, and they're faint. You feel these like faint allusions to the Exodus. I'll point them out as we get to them. So that's what we have. We've got distress, some crazy wild images, and we have memory. As you listen to me read the first 19 verses of this psalm, and I'll kind of introduce some things along the way as well, I pray that you might find an image that takes hold of your imagination, and that might be something that you can hold when you feel distressed and you feel God's absence. I love you, Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock. Hear those images? My fortress, my deliverer. My God is my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. You hear that commitment, the declaration of trust. I called to the Lord who is worthy of praise, and I have been saved from my enemies. Past tense. And now he's going to go back, and he's going to give this testimony of what God has done. I called to the Lord, the cords of death, Sorry, I'm not seeing the slide up there. I'll try again. In my distress, I went too far. Wait, problems. There it is. I didn't finish reading. Okay, here's the distress right here. The cords of death entangled me. A little dramatic. Does it feel a little dramatic? The torrents of destruction overwhelmed me. The cords of the grave coiled around me. The snares of death confronted me. So, distress on the brink. In my distress, I called to the Lord. I cried to my God for help. Here's this faint allusion to the Exodus. From his temple, he heard my voice. My cry came before his ears as God heard the Hebrew people, and into his ears. And then here we go. Get ready for a wild ride. The earth trembled and quaked. The foundations of the mountains shook. They trembled because he's angry. Why is he angry? He's angry because people are messing with his kingdom. Smoke rose from his nostrils, so God taking on these human characteristics, consuming fire from his mouth, burning coals blazed out of it. He parted the heavens, right? God didn't have to come down from the temple. God's coming down. Dark clouds are under his feet. He mounted the cherubim and flew. He soared on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covering. Can't do that with that little thing. Sorry. He made darkness his covering, his canopy around him, the dark rain clouds of the sky. Look at the contrast from dark to light. Out of brightness of his presence, clouds advanced with hailstorms and bolts of lightning. The Lord thundered from heaven. The voice of the Most High resounded. He shot arrows and scattered the enemy. Think about that. God is saying, there's no place for evil in my kingdom. There's no place for the sin of destruction that you commit against me and against one another. There's no place for brokenness. There's no place for suffering where God reigns. So he shot the arrows. He scattered the enemy with great bolts of lightning. He routed them. The valleys and the seas were exposed. Faint. Exodus memory. And the foundations of the earth laid bare at your rebuke. At the blast, get this, at the blast of the breath from your nostrils. All those things happen as if God breathes out. Then a huge shift in tone, right? After these violent descriptions showing God's power in all creation, he reached down from on high and took hold of me. He drew me out of deep waters. You're drowning when you're in deep waters. He rescued me from my powerful enemy, from my foes who were too strong for me. They confronted me on the day of disaster, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out into a spacious place. Hear the contrast from the distress where he says, the cords of the grave coiled around me, but now he brought me out into a spacious place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. Listen to these beautiful reflections, originally created just for you today.
God is my deliverer. I found I face the biggest distress when I'm far from God. Something keeps dragging me from God, but it doesn't really look like evil. It's something really familiar or even friendly. So sometimes I don't even know I'm being dragged by it. Just think of laziness. It has more like a comfy face. Without realizing I'm getting far away from God, I get comfortable to be in it, and I want to stay more longer. and eventually I call it my home, my safe place. I gradually expanded and built more and more homes, my places, but I just want to get more comfortable and stay inside. Then this is the very moment that I heard a paper is ripped. A finger shows up and pokes the edge of it. Oh wait, is it all fake? It was just a paper? Now I get to see what is beyond this world through the hole in the paper. Just like a galaxy, I get to see so much more that I couldn't see before. God is telling me, this is a real safe place, Jenna. Just like what the author says, author of Psalm said, God brings me out into a spacious place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. So, where are you now? What drags you from God? Where do you build your safe place outside of God? And how do you see God's redemption there? Thank you.
God is my refuge. When everything goes wrong, we tend to shrink down into ourselves, like sinking under the waves in a stormy sea. We think of how it will be calmer if we just try to block out the storm. My poem talks about how when we think that we're so far under that we can't be helped or saved, that's when you're going to hear God the best, because that's when he's going to pull you out. He saves us and he refuges us. When my foundations are shaking and my infirmed heart grows weak and cold, the world I know burns down around me and I am blinded by the smoke. The storm envelops me and my mind slips further down. I am so far from the light and in darkness I begin to drown. But his voice echoes above me through raining fire and storming seas. How does he hear me through this chaos and see me fall to my begging knees? I am drawn up from the depths of a loveless, lightless deep, but you refuged me from hellfire because it was I you chose to keep. But at your word and breath, O God, you calm the storm and level my enemies, smooth the creases in the earth and soothe all of my calamities. I pray you bless me with the breath I lost and draw the water from my lungs. I beg you set my feet upon the sand and strengthen me so I can run. He clears my blurry vision, he brings me to the light, he calls to me so I hear him, and he fixes my hand to write.
Hello. God is my foundation. When I look at the ocean, I'm captivated by the overwhelming power of the waves. Going to the ocean is such a powerful experience because you get to feel the wind, smell the salt, hear the crashing waves, and see the rich colors and movement unfold before you. Today, we've been seeing some wonderful work from fellow students, and I'm honored to share some of the work the Lord has put on my heart with you. Most of us have gone through times of deep distress like Dr. Ketcham talked about, whether that is failing an exam, wondering where you'll start your life, losing someone close to you, broken relationships, and a long list more. Personally, in my times of distress, I do feel like I'm drowning. But God is a foundation to me, and the work that I'm doing is supposed to be about that foundation. So I'm going to invite you into 3 pieces that I've made surrounding distress. And distress is going to be marked by the ocean, you are the person or the boat, and God is the light. So, in this first piece, we see that someone is in the whirlwind of the storm. The wave is coming for her, and she is facing it, cowering, but also wrapped in light and standing on a solid rock. You can tell that the wave is going to hurt, and she anticipates the break, and she stands in wait, wrapped in the light of God. The second piece is inspired by a quote, "We are in a sea of grief on a boat of grace." Sometimes the ocean is consistent. You're in the middle of grief and it feels never ending. Maybe the wave has already crashed and now you're just stuck. But I encourage you to focus on the boat of grace, the light that bursts from it, and that it brings the presence of God even as the sea seems endless. And the final piece that I invite you into is what it looks like to face a trial and be firmly rooted. The person facing the wave is unafraid. Their hands are open. The wave is massive and large, but they are unafraid, and you can tell that they are facing suffering. That is something that I believe Jesus calls us into in our suffering, that the waves will continue to come, and maybe he doesn't draw you out of the waters. Maybe the waters are still very present and very firm in your life. But he is there, and you can see that the feet, intentionally, his feet are almost, you cannot tell where the rock stops and the person begins. And the light that is within him is facing the ocean, facing the wave, and it's coming onto the distress, and there's a firmness in that presence. Our God is a mighty God that even the winds and the waves obey. So I ask you, which of these paintings do you relate to? Do you feel rooted? Are you fighting or tired amidst a seemingly unending sea? I hope that in each you can see God as a foundation. I've been in all three positions, a rock and a provider amidst the trial, as he has been for me through the deepest pains and the greatest joys. Thank you.
We want to share, what we hope to share with you today is a practice. A practice is something that you do, and you do it over and over because you get better at it. What do we do when we're in distress? Would you go back one slide, Miley? You know what we do? Close your eyes. Do it with me now. Close your eyes. Plant your feet firmly on the ground. You stand in a story that is larger than your moment. It's a story that you need a memory of, because God's deliverance that you don't feel right now, God's deliverance is real, and hold on to the deliverance of the past. Do it by grabbing an image. What stood out to you today? Is it God climbing out of his temple? Is it the story of God as deliverer, God as refuge, God as foundation, or God as a rock? Hold that image, or better yet, let it hold you. This is our God.